In 1981, his music took a stylistic turn because he produced his very first fully digital recording with the title of Dig It. Get it? Dig It. This style would go on for a few years from here, pretty much different from what had been produced in the past, but brilliant stuff. If you get the CD version, it comes with a DVD of a performance of this music as well. In 1981, he produced an album called Transfer. This again was on the IC label, his own label. 2 long tracks again. Pretty much sort of typical sequencer driven music from that period. It was originally produced to play at 45 RPM, but a lot of fans played it, I think probably initially accidentally at 33, and found they preferred it at 33. Either way, it's great stuff. Also in 1981, he produced his second of the Richard Vaughan albums, and this was Ton Vella, again on IC. And appearing with him on this one was Michael Garvins on vocals, Manuel Gurching, his old Asherah Temple compatriot, on guitar, Mike Shreve on percussion, and Carl Van Fried on guitar. Whoever Carl Van Fried was. I'm sure I've read who was under that pseudonym, but I can't remember. This has a stronger rock emphasis than the other one under this moniker. You get dreamy electronics, frenetic drumming, and some great guitar playing. It's my personal favourite of the Richard Van Fried albums. Now, next up we have another soundtrack. This is the soundtrack to an Australian horror movie called Next of Kin. Now, the director of the movie had Klaus come out to Australia. Klaus wrote some original music for the film, but then it got rejected. How dare he? So the director went ahead and used snippets of Klaus's music that had already been released, which makes this a frustrating and not a rewarding listen, because the snippets are very short, break off abruptly, so it doesn't really work, I don't think, as a piece of music. It might have worked on the film, never seen the film. This wasn't released until 2019 on the Round Table label. Next we go to 1983, and we have his double album Identity, again on IC, and again 4 long side-along tracks. This is a bit of a more challenging listen. It's a bit more avant-garde in places, particularly on something like the side 4 Sebastian in Traum. He's joined on here by Rainer Bloss on sounds and glockenspiel, Michael Shreve again on EH computer and Simmons percussion, and again Wolfgang Tiepold on cello. But I haven't really, I'd say it's challenging, avant-garde, but I really enjoy this album. The next one is a live album. He'd said his first live album was going to be his last, but 3 years later he produced another one. And this is a tour of Poland that he did. I won't try and produce Dzikuye, Poland. Dzikuye, I can't pronounce it. Live 83. And he's joined on tour by Raina Bloss, also on keyboards. This is seen as very much a companion piece to Identity. Right, 1984, and we get another soundtrack album called Angst. I know nothing about the film. It's a German film, I think. This was, a lot of this, the film was actually cut to the music rather than the other way around, which is the normal way. And this is generally considered as one of his weaker efforts. This was originally released on Brain, but this is a 2017 remaster, remastered by Krautrock of Grobschnitt fame. Next, still in 1984, I tell you this guy's prolific. He produced the third in the Vaughan project albums, and this is Richard Vaughan plays Megatone. This is a more extreme affair on the border of rock and electronics. I'm not so keen on the first track, Angry Young Boys, because of I'm not keen on the sax played by Axel Glenn Muller, and the vocals are quite with Michael Garvins is the vocalist. Also on here you get Michael Shreve on drums again, Uli Schober on drums, and Harold Katsch on guitars. But second side, Rich Meets Max, is pretty good. And sticking with 84, we have a studio album with Raina Bloss, and that's Driving. This is 7 shorter tracks that occupy the album, all with a theme of driving, obviously. It's sort of short, high energy tracks. It's pretty good actually. It cost me £5.49. There's still a sticker from Virgin on there. This is on, by this time he'd moved to Intim. I should have said the last 2 albums, Angst and Megatone, were on the Intim label, rather than IC. There is a Drive-In 2 album which has Klaus's name on it, but as far as I know, he had virtually nothing to do with that. I think it was just put on as a marketing ploy. It was just a Raina Bloss album. And then we get an album which isn't strictly just under his name. It's more considered a Michael Shreve album, but it's Michael Shreve with Kevin Shreve and Klaus Schulze. And this is Transfer Station Blue. This is an excellent album with some really great moments, superb percussion work, drum work by Michael Shreve. I've always rated his drumming. from his Santana days. So if you see this knocking around, it's well worth getting. Kevin Shreve, by the way, plays guitars, and obviously Klaus is on the synths. So we move on a year to 1985, and we get he's back on Brain by this point, and he produced this album with this horrible cover, Interface. Now this is a combination of typical Schulze with shorter tracks with sort of more or less straight rhythms rather than... Oh, music stopped there briefly. Not probably one of his best, but a decent album. 1986 sees him produce this album with this nice cover, Japanese style cover, Dreams. This probably inherits the same sort of territory as Interface, the album I've just shown. So probably again classed as a second tier Schulze album. But even that second tier Schulze album is excellent. 1987, and we get the fourth Richard Vaughan album called Meditation. Terrible punning. This features Jennifer Uberberg on sitar, Texton on programming and keys. Doesn't sound like a proper name. Carl Van Fried, obviously Klaus, on keys. The Aldauer Manacor on quiet. Tim Bales on percussion, and Steve Jolliffe, his old compatriot in the early Tangerine Dream, on flute. And I must admit, this is really great stuff. Very atmospheric, lovely and peaceful, particularly when Steve Jolliffe plays on the first side. The second side, Meditation, is superb. Not a great cover, but brilliant album. 1987, and sees him collaborating with Andreas Grosser with the album Babel. This is on the Virgin label, their Venture sub-label. Short tracks. This is more, it's good stuff, but it's more, I think, an Andreas Grosser album than it is a Klaus Schulze album. We get into 1988 next, and we get another album with a punning. Oh, sorry, no. Then he put the wrong first CD. We get this album, Entrance. This was originally on the Brain label, but this is a 2005 reissue on SPV Revisited, from which you get the 4 original tracks plus an 8-minute bonus track. And for many, this is seen as a return to form and one of the best albums of the 80s from Klaus. Get that back there. And the 1990 was the next album. This is Mediterranean Pads, another punning title. Again, originally on Brain. My copy is UK regional on Thunderbolt. This is sort of a transitional album where he started with the use of sampled sounds, which was to become a big thing for him. Staying in 1990, he did a concert on the 5th of August 1989 in Dresden, and in March and May of 1990 in Hamburg, I think. Now, he prepared tracks, bass tracks for the concert, but because Dresden was in Eastern Germany at the time, the police restricted the time he could play, so he could only do what he called Dresden 1 and 2. So when he got back from the tour, he recorded properly the other three, Dresden's 3, 4 and 5. And what you get on the vinyl is just the studio tracks 3, 4 and 5. If you get the CD, it's a double CD, and you get Dresden 1 and 2, the live tracks as well. So that's probably worth getting on CD. Probably seen as one of the peaks of his sampling era albums. Good stuff. Sorry, if you see me grimace at any time, it's because I've done me back in. So, right. Now, sticking in 1983, I've told you he's prolific, and he produced the first of his Mammoth CD sets. This is the silver edition, 10 CD set of material from 75 and 76 and 92 and 93, all previously unreleased. I pre-ordered my copy and it came numbered 819 and personally signed by Klaus. Some brilliant music in here, film music that he did, live stuff, all sorts of great material. Like I said, 10 CDs worth of it. So I won't go into it all, but it covers quite a few different bases. In 1994, or 1993, I've missed one, he also did a concert in Cologne on the 11th of May and in Hamburg in the summer. And again, this heavily features the sampling that he was heavily into at that point. Sorry about the glare with these jewel cases. Probably one of the best albums of that period. Great live album. 1994, and he takes a bit of a left turn here. He does this album with the great title, Klaus Schulze Goes Classic. This was, apart from one track of his own, this is all his interpretations of tracks by Smetana, Schubert, von Weber, Brahms, Grieg and Beethoven. It's not my favourite album, I've got to admit. It utilises, you know, string samples quite heavily with some sampled voices, but pleasant, I would say, more than exciting. The next one is one I struggle with, I must admit, and this is Totentag. This is an opera featuring, I think, 5 German opera singers, with Klaus obviously on keyboards providing the music. It's based on the life and eventual suicide of Austrian poet George Trakl in 1914. George Trakl, if you might remember, was the name of a track on my favourite album, X. How much you like this depends on how much you like opera. I like the music. I could do without the operatic vocals, to be honest. So, not an album that gets very highly rated, I think, by many fans. Sticking with 1994, and we get another live album, Das Wagner Disaster. This one was recorded at concerts in Paris and in Rome in May 94. But it's quite an interesting, risky experiment, because it's a 2 CD, but basically the 2 CDs are the same recordings from the concerts, but remixed. CD 1 has the wild mix tracks, and CD 2 seems to have the soft mix tracks. And they do sound very different. So, recommended. We then get another Vaughan album. And this is Translation. Now this has Klaus playing white keys, UW Überschall on black keys, and George Stettner on modulation and pitch wheel, with some vocals from Marion Gold on one track, Michael Bolter on guitar on one track, Mark Figger on sax, and Hans Marathon guitars on another track. Not my favourite album. This is more abstract dance music. It's probably the furthest he's moved away from his usual electronic music stylings, but an interesting experiment. Have I missed one? I have missed one. I'm sorry. Out of order. Sack the filmmaker. This was going back to 91. This is Tot Beyond Recall. This is on the Virgin Venture label again. And this was the album where he really did get heavily into sampling. He'd played with it a bit, toyed with it a bit before, but this one was the album which he heavily got into that style of music. Sorry about that.